Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Meet Up with Mallory, our virtual coffee hour that we hold every single week that the Senate is in session. Wanted to start out and first of all say happy Labor Day weekend and acknowledge that it is Labor Day weekend, and a huge thank you to all of our brothers and sisters in labor for the past generations. You know, we have weekends and the 5-day work week and safe business practices because of labor. So this is the annual recognition of all of the gains that the labor movement have brought us that have benefited everybody. And traditionally, I have enjoyed joining the Labor Day march down in Detroit. That was canceled again this year out of safety with the Delta variant spreading with COVID. So bummed that we can't be there, but we are together in spirit. And everybody, as you get out and celebrate the long weekend, just remember that we have weekends thanks to the labor movement. So wanted to jump in and actually start things a little bit differently this week. So we are going to start with some good news, shake it up a little bit, because many of our school districts have gone back to school, especially after the past almost 2 years, my goodness, that we have had navigating this pandemic together with all of the disruptions that we had in our school year last year. It was so fun to see so many kids and teachers and parents and families getting back to school this week. So we just wanted to share a few pictures from around our district that were shared by our districts. So far, Birmingham, Troy, Clawson, Rochester have started back in school. Royal Oak returns after the Labor Day holiday. So we just wanted to scroll through some of these awesome pictures of seeing kids back in the classroom, which so great. Superintendents and principals and school safety officers welcoming all of the kids back. We love to see that. And then we wanted to share one of the exciting additions to our district, Delilah, who is the beautiful dog seen here, is a therapy dog in one of our school districts who welcomes students back with fur and smiles and licks, and just so fun. So we wanted to start with that to start this coffee hour off in a good mood, because I think, like everything, it is incumbent on all of us to take time to celebrate the good moments. I think there is so much that we have all gone through over the past 2 years, and it feels like every week there is just so much news that comes at us that is stressful and pummeling. So there are just some things that are great, and getting back to school is one of them. So welcome back to everybody who has gone back to school, who's going back to school. I hope you have a fantastic year, and we can't wait to celebrate all of the things that you're going to do this year. All right, so jumping into our regularly scheduled programming. If you are new to our virtual coffee hours, maybe you've gotten a flyer on your door that informs you of what we do here, welcome. So this is live. You get to talk with me. I share an update on what is happening in the state or broader news. Then we touch on what is happening in the legislature at the Capitol. We talk about some good news, which we gave you a sneak peek of already, and then we open it up for a live Q&A. So we are live streaming this on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So no matter what platform you are tuning in on, you can ask any question you want live in the comments. We just ask that you put your name, if that is not immediately evident by your screen name, what city you are representing, and I say representing in case you are already out on a Labor Day vacation, and then feel free to ask your question. I will answer as many of them as I can. However, if it is a question that I might not know the answer to, we've got Liz, who joins us for all of these coffee hours, who will take your information and make sure that we follow up with you directly via email, or if you just want to say hello, feel free to do that as well. All right, so, the big news of the week didn't have anything to do directly with Michigan, but is something that I do want to address, and that is the news out of Texas, which is an abortion law that the Texas legislature passed that would prohibit abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy, which, to be very clear, is before most women, including myself when I got pregnant, even know that they are pregnant, and it is well before fetal viability. It would set up the most extreme abortion restrictions in the country. But what is more concerning about the way this law was crafted is that it does not put enforcement in the hands of the state. It puts enforcement in the hands of regular people. So it is encouraging any normal person to file suit against anybody who participates or aids or abets in a woman getting an abortion. So that can be neighbors, kids, Uber drivers, doctors, family members who may be sharing information, friends. And it's incredibly dangerous because it sets up and really legalizes and encourages a bounty hunt. The way that it's written, a citizen can be rewarded $10,000 for each report that they make of anybody aiding and abetting in an abortion. And the law was crafted this way because precedent set by Roe v. Wade really relies on the jurisdiction and the oversight of the state, of the government. But this law, by taking the oversight and the enforcement out of the hands of the state and putting it in the hands of regular people, created a loophole. So the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, was asked to weigh in to block this law from going into effect based on the precedent set by Roe v. Wade. And originally it looked like the Supreme Court wasn't going to take this up, but they issued a ruling that upheld this law. And that sets an incredibly dangerous precedent where even though Roe v. Wade is still the law of the land, what this clears the way for really in any state around the country is that laws like this can be put in place, and the Supreme Court has set the precedent. They will not intervene. And, I have spoken to a lot of girls and women and friends over the past few days who are terrified about this. If you have ever been to a Planned Parenthood clinic, I used Planned Parenthood when I got out of college to access contraception because I did not have health insurance. They were wonderful. And you have seen some of the aggression and abuse that already takes place outside of clinics for women who are going in for any number of services or for providers. That took place and has been taking place even before there was a cash reward for doing so. So, I was very vocal over the past couple of days about this and expressing my concern for how dangerous this precedent is. And we've got a lot of work to do. I think what this shows is the courts will not necessarily step up and protect this access. And one of the things that I pointed out, I wrote a Facebook post about this. I introduced the Reproductive Health Care Act in 2019 as a bill here, which would codify abortion access into law in the state of Michigan. A lot of people might ask why. And the reason is we know that outlawing abortion does not stop abortions from happening. It just makes it incredibly dangerous for girls, women, families. Oftentimes abortions, over 60% of abortions, I think the number is recently, are from families who already have a number of kids, got pregnant unintentionally and can't have any more or don't want to have any more. And this sets a very, very dangerous precedent for women, girls, and families who, will still seek out this procedure, but it will be done very dangerously. So simultaneously, what I want to say is we should also do everything we can to do what we know brings down abortion rates, which is proactively preventing unintended pregnancies from happening in the first place. So that's expanding access to contraception, making sure that it is covered by health insurance, making sure that we are providing women and girls in school and boys, quite frankly, with accurate science-based sex ed so that people can make the right decisions and understand informed consent, and making sure that for people who do pursue it, that it is safe and it is as safe as possible. Some of you may remember that a couple of years ago, I shared a really heartbreaking story on the floor of the Senate of a resident who did have a later abortion after discovering a fetal abnormality that would have either resulted in her never being able to conceive again if it had gotten worse, or if the fetus did survive to term, probably would have died within the matter of days and would have been absolutely tortured just for the little time that it may have been alive. And this couple made the decision, a really hard decision, because they wanted to have a child, to terminate this pregnancy for the variety of reasons that we discussed. And just their story about how hard that procedure was to even get, even though, her husband, I think, was a really, really strong voice in this story, because in his mind, he never thought that they would be seeking out an abortion. In his mind, this was a medical emergency. And I think we need to start talking about this very candidly, in that it is a medical procedure. It can be a medical emergency. It can be a very routine procedure, but that it is a decision that needs to be made between doctors, women, and families. And we cannot, I will not, in good conscience, support anything that makes it dangerous for women. So there will certainly be more on this. I know a number of you have already asked how you can help and how you can get involved. One of the things for me that was really moving over the past few years was actually watching in Ireland. Ireland was considering legalizing access to abortion, and there were Irish expats, women, who flew back to Ireland from all over the country, stood in line at airports, did whatever they could to get back to Ireland to support this vote, because women fundamentally understand how important this is and how dangerous. Even if, all things willing, you never find yourself in a position of having to need to make this decision or this choice. We need to protect women and girls and families, and do everything we can to additionally support the foster care system. There are already too many kids in the foster care system. Make sure we have paid leave and universal health care for children, and expand access to schooling so that every family and child in the state of Michigan has the best chance at success. So more to come on this soon. But like I said, for those who have reached out and asked how you can help, there's going to be a lot more. We've heard, like I said, that the Supreme Court ruling will likely set up a situation where this push will be made across the country. So state legislatures are the stopgap for this. This is where these policies are crafted and drafted and move forward. So I would encourage following Planned Parenthood, if you are not already, signing up for volunteer lists, trying to see what they are doing if you want to get involved, or NARAL, NARAL as well, is doing a lot of good work here. And, Dana Nessel, Attorney General Nessel, kind of took a lot of heat in 2019 after we both took office. We were at an event together, and she said very candidly, she expects that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. And at the time, people thought this was sensationalist and really kind of hit her hard on it. But we're seeing a few years later that these continued kind of attempts at finding workarounds or trying to hit Roe are happening now. And we need to get involved. And I will be involved. I will be very vocal about this. That is potentially risky in a district like ours that is pretty evenly split, Republican, Democratic, but it's too important not to. And I think what I want to do is really dispel the idea that people who are pro-choice are anti-family, because that is fundamentally not true. And I have found myself hardened in that belief now that I am a mom of a daughter myself. And yeah, so we'll keep going. Feel free to reach out to us and stay involved, and we will keep you posted with more. That was probably longer than I wanted to talk on that, but it's hard not to get really emotional about what's a hard day for a lot of women around the country. All right, no good way to pivot, so we're just going to pivot into, we had session this week. We were back in Lansing for our first full Senate session in a number of months, because we were on our in-district work period. So throughout the summer, that's where we didn't have to go to Lansing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So we could spend more time in our district, meeting with constituents, working on legislation, which we were doing all summer long. But we were back. There weren't really any bills move that were particularly impactful. But I did want to touch on one that was, just to kind of illustrate the process. So there was a bill that was brought up in a committee that I serve on. I'm actually the Democratic Vice Chair of Economic Development and Small Business. And a bill came before us that was a House bill that would allow for parents of homeschooled children to be the authorizer for a youth work permit. Right now, the way our system works is if you are a minor and you want to get a work permit, you need an authorizing signature from a school administrator, and then you can get a part-time job. I've had jobs since I was 12. So, this was something that really spoke to me. I've always been in school and working. And, on its face, totally makes sense. If you're a homeschooled student, you do not attend the local public school, that you may not have a relationship with that administrator. So why not have your parents sign off on that? However, between that bill coming out of committee and getting to the Senate floor, there was a group that reached out to us, a Coalition of Responsible Homeschool Association or Parents. I forget the acronym, and if you're watching from that group, I apologize. But who brought up some real concerns about the fact that while overwhelmingly homeschool parents, like all parents, have the best interest of their kids at heart, there are the rare occasional stories of these types of systems being used abusively. This organization brought to us that occasionally laws like this have been used for human trafficking, for labor-related reasons, effectively pulling kids out of school just for labor purposes to work full-time and not even get an education. A colleague of mine brought up a concerning story from a number of years ago where, two children, and this is really gruesome, so trigger warning for anybody who's watching, two children were found having been killed in a freezer, and they were, had been marked for months as being homeschooled, and weren't found for quite a while. So, there's a much larger conversation to be had on, how we set up systems to support all parents and families and kids and make sure everybody has opportunities and that we're not really letting anybody kind of go missing. But because of that information that we learned between the bill moving from committee to the Senate floor, I voted no on the bill. I think, in lack of a broader system to address those issues, having the check of maybe just getting a signature from a school administrator, even if you are homeschooled in that area, is okay for right now. But I understand, particularly if you're outstate in a more rural area, that is a harder thing to do. And I hope there will be a better solution coming forward. Another bill that you may have seen that moved was the majority introduced a bill to prohibit any governor, future governor, from utilizing the threat alert system to send out text messages related to executive orders or announcements. And that passed along party lines. I voted no against it, and this is just indicative of some of the frustrating things that we face in the legislature sometimes. The threat alert system is different than the emergency alert system. So the bill that actually passed, the Michigan State Police were asked to comment on it, and they said that system that the bill addresses has only been used once in history, and it was for an active shooter situation. So that system wasn't actually used throughout the pandemic. The emergency alert system is a different system, and that is what was used throughout the pandemic. You may remember we, as citizens, received 3 text messages throughout the pandemic as stay-at-home orders were issued, lifted, to keep us informed. So I voted no on it anyway, because I think it is important for any emergencies that information get out to residents. But the bill did not do what I think the bill drafters intended it to do in the beginning. All right, we are pivoting back to good news. Bear with me as I pull up our visuals. I've done a much better job of this week than last week in trying to make sure that you all can see the screen. All right, so This is really exciting. You can see here on a screen is a STEM mobile innovation station, which is super cool. The new STEM I mobile innovation station is a 1,000 square foot lab on wheels where K-12 students learn STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math through autonomous vehicles, robotics, extended reality, so virtual reality or augmented reality, just extending reality in all of its many forms, and manufacturing. This lab will visit all 28 county school districts this school year and hitting one district per week. So keep an eye out if you have kids in school for this to come through your district. It sounds really, really fun and a great way to learn about all of these things in the STEM field. Next up, a group of students from Birmingham created a sports podcast. So if you have a long commute like me, maybe download this podcast to your phone so you've got something to listen to. Seaholm High School seniors Cooper and Carter and Mitchell and Groves High School senior Ethan, all fans of podcasts, as I am as well. I listen to way too many podcasts between my home and Lansing. So they created a podcast to share their love of sports with kids in underserved communities. And actually, they've spent their summer collecting donations for their sports equipment drive to benefit families in Detroit. So I always love when we see students in our districts who really want to help out and reach out outside of our district, outside of our county, and help out our neighbors, which I love. So thank you guys. I can't wait to check out the podcast, and good luck on collecting and sharing all of the sports equipment. Last but not least, for our good news for the week, Troy is asking residents to get involved in submitting names for the city's new town center park that is being added to the Civic Center complex near Livernois and 16 Mile. I have already proposed a very original name within our office, Parky McParkface, which you may remember from the infamous Bodie McBoatface, but I'm sure you all have a much better name than I have come up with for the park. So Troy residents, you can submit your names for the park on the Troy government website, and we will be sure to drop the link into the chat if you are watching on Facebook, because it is one that if I read it to you, you're not going to remember or be able to know what that link is off the top of your head. So really exciting. I can't wait to see this new park and see what the new community-led name is going to be. So with that, that's all we have scheduled on the regular agenda. So we are opening it up to Q&A time. So I am going to bring on our Director of Constituent Relations and Services. And I think we had one day I'm actually going to get your specific title right, but that's on us for creating a title. It's like 16.
It is a long title. I was just commenting thumbs up for Parky McParkface. You know, I'm a big fan of it.
All right. So this is the Q&A portion. Liz is going to facilitate Q&A. I know we've had some questions that were submitted ahead of the coffee hour this week, but this is a reminder. If you have a question, no matter what platform you're on, make sure to include your name if that is not already obvious based on your username, what city you are representing, and then fire away with your question. Liz, what do we have this week?
Yeah, first one is from Kevin from Royal Oak via our Submit Your Question form. Wants to know if there's any update on the auto no-fault fix and what's going on with that.
Kevin, that's a great question, and one that has been certainly frustrating for me. So I serve on the Insurance and Banking Committee in the Senate. So we were the committee that reviewed SB 1 in 2019, which was the bill that became the auto no-fault reform. Now, at the time, I voted against this bill for a number of reasons. You know, I think that what we saw in the committee is that there were not mechanisms to guarantee substantial rate savings, but worse than that, that my fear was the protections that were in place would be eroded away, and that we would leave particularly the most vulnerable or people who have found themselves in catastrophic car accidents, along with direct care workers, out to dry. And, you know, this isn't a situation where I'm excited about having been right. You know, my no vote didn't stop something from being passed into law, but we are seeing that play out right now where, you know, this law went into effect in July 1st in terms of the reimbursement rates for direct care workers. And we are seeing direct care worker companies closing. We are seeing catastrophically injured residents who had been receiving benefits from the system who suddenly find themselves without help, without direct care workers, without a facility to go to. And this is very much a life and death situation. So I was on a work group related to this with DIFS, the Department of Insurance and Financial Services, along with some of my colleagues in the House. And there is a fixed bill that was introduced in the Senate, along with a number of bills that I'm not sure if they were introduced yet in the House, but were planning on being introduced in the House, that would do a lot of things to fix the flaws in what was passed and what went into law. But so far, the majority leader, Senator Mike Shirkey, and Senator Tice, the chair of Insurance and Banking, have not shown any interest in taking these bills up or moving them. Senator Shirkey is really on record of saying this is up to the industry to sort out on its own. We will keep pushing. I signed on to a letter led by Julie Brixey, House Representative, to really encourage the courts to intervene, because the way that this law is being interpreted right now is making it retroactive. So that is not my understanding how the law was written or intended to be interpreted. So that is one piece of it, to make sure if you were somebody who was already catastrophically injured and were receiving benefits, that you would not be affected by this. We did pass, before we went out on our in-district work period, a $25 million pot of money to support rehabilitation businesses who were impacted by this rate decrease. And, one thing that I am proud of is that initial number was $10 million, and I helped negotiate to get it up to 25, which is something, but I know it is a Band-Aid to a Band-Aid. That is no way to plan a business. That is not a pot of money that is going to exist forever. My hope was that would get us through for at least a few months and see the actual fixed bills be taken up. But so far, that hasn't happened. So if this is something that you are concerned about, I am as well. I would encourage you to email Senator Tice. We always encourage our residents, not only contact me as your senator for issues that you care about, but the chair of the committee that a bill or bills have gone through. They are not only responsible for their own district, they are responsible for the entire state when it comes to the legislation that moves through that committee. So we will share her office's contact information. And I would also encourage, contacting Majority Leader Shirkey as well, because he really sets the agenda and kind of signs off on what moves and what doesn't move. But we'll keep trying, and we will keep people updated if there is good news to share.
Okay, so the next question is also from our Submit Your Question form from Nancy in Birmingham. She had a couple of questions, so if I'm understanding them correctly, I believe she wants to know, from a public health perspective, why is there more pressure to get the COVID vaccine as opposed to something over like the flu vaccine?
That's a great question. So I'm a huge nerd. I'm just going to say that right now. So when the pandemic hit here originally, February, March of last year, I really dove into understanding and trying to learn about the 1918 flu pandemic and what happened then, what mistakes were made, maybe what we can learn from, what we could expect on how to get out of a pandemic and see the other side of it. And what happened with the flu, there were vaccines and medications developed to support it, but as the flu mutated, so we're seeing this with COVID right now, and you can relate this to the Delta variant, which is a new version of COVID that is out now. As the flu mutated in 1918, it actually got less deadly. So it became the flu that we know today. So the flu that was kind of passing around in 1918 was more like COVID in terms of its deadliness at the time. It really mutated into the flu that we know today, which is, sucks if you get it. It does lead to fatalities, but it is not nearly as dangerous or fatal as COVID is now. So, I get the flu vaccine every year. I encourage people to. It's something that I have always been really lucky to have workplaces that have offered that, and I've taken advantage of that ever since. It's free, and similar to the COVID vaccine, the whole idea is if you get the flu, hopefully it's a lot easier to get through it than if you didn't have the vaccine. So, there is certainly a public education push to get people the flu vaccine. But the reason that the push to get the COVID vaccine is so much more now is this is a novel virus that we don't know that much about, even 2 years in. There are still studies taking place on the impacts of long COVID, people who have had COVID and recovered, but still suffer from brain fog. A lot of people still haven't gone back to work because they can't focus, still having respiratory issues. People who still, a year later, haven't gotten back their sense of taste or smell. And it's kind of a devastating, debilitating impact for some people with long COVID. So it's still being studied. And the rate of death that we've seen from it is bad. And with Delta, it's getting worse again. One of my big concerns is the spike in pediatric hospitalizations, the number of kids who are now being hospitalized with COVID, even though, kind of the overwhelming consensus is that kids tend to recover, but some don't, and some are dying, and some are getting very, very sick. So, the vaccine is the most tested vaccine in history. And there was a great story that The Daily did, a podcast, interviewing the woman who invented mRNA vaccines. She committed her entire life to it. So this is something where she's been working on the mRNA technology for 20 years and finally got it to a place where it was fully developed, and they were able to use it to attack the spike protein in COVID, and it was very successful. So, it's successful. It's the best tool we have right now to fight this virus. And I think that's why you see just the push to really get as many people vaccinated as possible, because unlike the flu in 1918, where it evolved and became a less deadly virus, this one, at least so far, is becoming more deadly as variants develop. And this is the best tool we have right now for all of us to protect ourselves and our loved ones and get back to normal and stay at normal.
All right. Next question is from Douglas on Facebook. Wants to know if there's any legislative push to require both a back license plate as well as obviously the back one, but a front license plate on motor vehicles.
There is not a push that I am aware of for license plates on the front of cars. And I know if you are a car nerd like I am, you hope it stays that way because it just ruins the whole aesthetic of your car.
Okay, next question is Sally on Facebook. They want to know, has there been any update or response from DTE in response to the letter that you sent them?
Yeah, great question. So a number of colleagues and myself had a meeting with DTE this week to discuss a lot of the questions that were presented in the letter, but also just on the broader scale, right? So since we had our storms here in Michigan, and since we sent that letter, we have seen Hurricane Ida down in New Orleans. We have seen flooding in New York. My hometown in New Jersey is completely flooded, was completely flooded. And there was a video that I actually posted on Twitter of our minor league baseball team. The water was up into the stands. So we have just seen, the devastating effects of extreme weather around the country. So we had a meeting with DTE this week. And I think in the wake of all of that, we asked very directly, what are the plans or how are plans changing to acknowledge that these extreme weather instances are now the norm and not the exception? And it was a good conversation, and we will continue to have conversations with them, not letting them off the hook, and also acknowledging that everybody on the ground, DTE line workers did an incredible job working around the clock trying to get us back up. But one of the things they brought up, which is valid, but also something we need to plan for, is last year when we had a number of summer storms, they were spaced out around an average of 20 to 30 days between them. This year, in our summer storm season, the average between the storms, especially over the past couple months, was 5 or 6 days. So that made it really, really hard for our water systems, for our electrical system to rebound and get repaired if as soon as we kind of start to come back up again, we're pummeled. And, I said, that's valid. We have to plan for that being the norm, because I think what we're seeing around the country and around the world is that is the norm now. We need to plan for these extreme weather instances. And I brought up as well, so Patty Poppy, who used to run Consumers Energy here in Michigan, moved out to California. She now heads up PG&E, which people may know as the utility that went bankrupt, caused a number of forest fires, has forced rolling outages, intentional planned rolling outages for Californians because of the number of forest fires that are happening. So not an easy job to go take, but she has announced since going out there that there is now a plan for PG&E to underground bury the lines for at least 10,000 miles of lines. Traditionally, this has been something that the utilities here in Michigan and nationally have said is too expensive to do. And doesn't make them immune to weather. It could still be hit by shovels, ice, roots growing through them, all kind of the things we see with underground infrastructure. But the Michigan Public Services Commission has asked that DTE commission a new study to examine the feasibility of undergrounding. I think acknowledging that it is becoming more and more costly for us to have extended power outages and dangerous, particularly when we're in heat snaps, where, if power's out for 4 or 5 days and you are a senior who lives alone and it's 90 degrees and above, that's a really, really dangerous situation to be in. So I'm encouraged by that. I hope that study gives us some more information to go off of. DTE also announced yesterday or a couple days ago that they will be spending $70 million on additional tree trimming, which I know a lot of you have probably heard for a long time. But that is something that, I don't know about anybody watching, but the power lines to my house run behind my house. So there's, all of the houses that kind of butt up against each other in our backyards, and the lines run between the properties in the back. There are trees that grow into all of those lines. And, if DTE were to do a more proactive job of making sure those are maintained and maintained regularly, we would see significantly fewer outages with the above ground infrastructure that we currently have. So that's a little bit of what we learned. And we will keep pushing and keep people informed on what we hear moving forward.
All right. And then the next question is Bill from Clausen via YouTube, which I think this is our second ever YouTube comment. So that's exciting. But asks a really important question. And I know I'd love to hear the answer after, the last few hard months of news. But how do you stay inspired?
That's a great question. And Bill, I think I saw sort of the rest of the question, which was, about being involved in church groups or union activities, right? So this is a trend that has taken place throughout our country over time, where traditionally in communities, people found community within their church groups, union groups, civil service groups. But as we've seen the rise of the internet, those are less prevalent. And that is not, a commentary on the information that those groups provided, but there is less of places for people to meet weekly or more than weekly to get together and be a group and do kind of civil service activities. And it's really, really easy to feel defeated and get trapped in just the onslaught of online news. So something that's really important for me, it is a book I have recommended in the past, but Politics is for Power is a book that I recommend to everybody because it talks about this, and it talks about, whether you're politically involved on sort of the high news style politics or, politics on a local level is activism, right? It's getting together as a group of people to improve our communities. And this book talks a lot about that and critiques kind of our current model of people who, and I will be the first to admit, it's really easy to just get stuck doom scrolling and going down Twitter or Facebook and just feeling so bad about the constant pressure of everything that you feel like you can't be involved and that it isn't inspiring. So it's something that I do very intentionally is I try to log off sometimes. I subscribe to newspapers and try my best to wait until the newspaper comes and read it. And that's how I consume my news. I don't watch any 24-hour news channel, Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, none of it, right? Because it is, when you just think about the business model of it, it has to be breaking news 24 hours a day, all day long to keep you engaged and to keep selling ads, in the same way that Facebook and all of these digital platforms make money by the amount of time you spend on these platforms. So it's always going to kind of serve you things that just get you irritated and anxious and depressed. And sometimes you just got to check out. So, I think finding actual groups of people to see and spend time with, whether that is joining a gym or a running club, or finding a church group or a union activity or anything like that. I think more of that, and we have to actually plan that into our lives, is what I do, and it's how I stay inspired. But really the biggest tip is just like log off and subscribe to a newspaper and like enjoy it with a cup of coffee. But yeah, and I appreciate the question.
Yeah. After I watched Inside by Bo Burnham, I deleted all my social media, and then I re-downloaded it because Molly won a cake. So
yeah,
I had to say Molly won a cake, Aaron via Facebook asks, how is infrastructure in the state proceeding? Obviously, there's a lot of road work going on in Oakland County, and how is it being funded?
Infrastructure in the state is proceeding. Okay, so great question. And we could dedicate an entire separate coffee hour, and we probably will at some point, to how things are funded and the budget process. You may remember a couple of years ago, after the legislature did not come up with a solution to increase revenue for infrastructure, that the governor issued bonds for road construction. Those have gone into effect, and we are repairing a lot of our roads with those funds. So you see, all of I-75 was torn down to the dirt and is being rebuilt, not just kind of the coating that we see on top traditionally with road work. So there's a lot of funding that goes into infrastructure funding, including the gas tax, other kind of business taxes, and we can post a really, really handy dandy, very detailed poster that was it Senate Fiscal or House Fiscal? Does House Fiscal do that?
I think it's House Fiscal, yeah.
Okay. So this is getting in the weeds. There's two independent groups within the legislature, the House Fiscal Agency and the Senate Fiscal Agency, who are nonpartisan, who serve the legislature and analyze everything budget related and oversee the budget and help inform us on our jobs. The House Fiscal Agency puts together a poster that we will share a link to that shows where every single dollar comes into the state and where every single dollar goes. It is color coded. It's super detailed. It will visually answer all of your questions, like what about the lottery money? And you'll see that all of the lottery money does go into schools, but it's still like a small part of the school aid budget. It's great. We will share it. Full caveat, it will be for last year's budget because we have not yet passed this year's budget. That is due October 1st, but that's the update on road funding.
Yeah, I will link that in there. And then the last question we have right now is from Leanne on Facebook. What is going on with UIA? They're holding up benefits for people that got caught up in red tape. They have been waiting on an appeal since July. I'm concerned about how many people are going to be losing benefits with Delta coming at us now.
Oh, yes. Leanne, we are with you. We are incredibly frustrated. I mean, my staff, and huge credit to Liz and Debbie and Lisa and Molly, everybody on our team who has been working tirelessly for the past 18 months on helping people access and troubleshoot to get unemployment benefits. It is not typically the role of a state legislature office to be so hands-on with that, but it is something, at this point, we have now helped over 1,000 constituents troubleshoot and get access to UIA benefits. But, this is years and years and years in the making. The UIA department was drastically cut and underfunded, but that's not an excuse now, right? Like, UIA was not ready for this pandemic and did not have the staff or resources they need to do that. But 18 months in, it's also really frustrating that it is still such a challenge for people and that we have not evolved. So we continue to talk to UIA about this and express our concerns and frustrations. And I am also with you that I am concerned with Delta spreading, that the federal unemployment benefits are set to expire. That is something that is out of our hands. If the federal government decides to renew those benefits, I haven't heard any conversations that they will. But that is a concern and something we will be keeping an eye on, because I do know, people want to go back to work. People want to get back to their lives, but they want to do it safely. And I know that is a concern for a lot of people, especially with Delta spreading again, that, returning to a physical workplace, especially if you are a mom or a parent and you have a child at home and you don't have access to childcare, it's a real issue. So if you do know somebody who or you are having trouble with UIA directly, we do have a form on our website that you can fill out, add your information, and then my staff will follow up with you to see what we can do to help. I will say full transparency, as a state legislature office, we do not have access directly to the UIA system in the same way you would not want us to have access to your medical records or any other sensitive information. But we can help, advocate on your behalf with the department, or if you haven't tried, or if anybody hasn't tried reaching out to the Michigan Works Agency. They did form a partnership with UIA. They do have access to the unemployment system. They have locations in Oakland County, and they have been a tremendous resource even for us over the past 2 years in helping troubleshoot a lot of these issues.
Yep, and I added that just in our comments now. So
Cool.
That's all the questions that we have that I can see.
Great. Well, this one went almost the whole hour. I've been trying
Yeah.
to for it, but we are back and it's fall and people have questions. So I want to thank everybody for joining us for another edition of this. If you are traveling this Labor Day weekend, please be careful, wear a mask, social distance, all of the things that we know at this point are easy to do to help stop the spread of COVID, stop you from bringing it back to somebody vulnerable in your family. But enjoy the weekend, enjoy time with your family. Liz, do you have plans for the Labor Day weekend?
I do. I'm going up north to Houghton Lake to my grandma's cottage.
Oh, that's going to be nice. What I love right now is it is like September 1st hit and we just went from summer to fall. So
Right.
I haven't been up north since September 1st, but I would imagine it's like full fall colors now and it's cider season. And
Yeah, it's like the last time we'll be able to take our little pontoon out before, winterizing it and whatnot. So
nice.
hopefully it's a lot of fun.
Well, and if anybody is
warm.
staying locally, I know a lot of the cider mills are opening or have
Yes.
opened. So it's my favorite time of the year is cider season. So get out, have fun, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.